story that I chose for Hitler was boring as hell. It was actually putting myself to sleep. I couldn't get past like the first 3 paragraphs. It was just, you know what it is? It was a lot of politics and the war, and it just, I don't know, it just bored me. I couldn't even get past, like I said, the first 3 paragraphs, so I'm gonna have to come back to that story. But anyway, I went to my Kindle to see what I had downloaded, and this book popped up, and it's called Bizarre True Crimes. And there's actually 20 crazy and shocking true crime stories in this book. So I decided to do it. If I'm being honest too, I actually like these mini stories better than just doing one big story. I mean, I like the big stories too, but the little ones to me seem to be more of a wow or more of something to discuss. Because I think like with the bigger stories, we kind of know most of what we need to know. You know, like Ted Bundy and like the real famous cases, I guess I should say. But anyway, let's begin. Now this first story has to do with 5 young men. I didn't read the complete story, but I do know that they went to a basketball game and then they went missing. And I think some of them were found, but it's just a mystery of actually what happened to them. So let's see what we come up with. Okay, so this first story takes place in, I think you pronounce it Yuba County, and it's titled 5 Mystery. On a freezing winter's night in California, 5 men drive up a treacherous mountain road into a bizarre true crime legend. What happened next raises enough questions to fill a book. At 5 in the morning on February 24th, 1978, during a cold California winter, Ted Weiner's grandmother, Emma Jean, was awoken suddenly, not by a loud noise or a movement in the darkness, but a terrible feeling. She couldn't explain what had woken her up, but she knew something was wrong. Emma Jean went to check on her grandson, who had been at a basketball game with 4 of his friends the night before. To her surprise and horror, 32-year-old Ted was nowhere to be seen. She remembered the previous night very well. The winter moon was bright in the sky, and the snow drifts were rolling down the mountains. Ted had been on his way out to meet friends. 29-year-old Bill Sterling, 24-year-old Jack Hewitt, 30-year-old Jack Madruga, and 25-year-old Gary Mathis. Emma Jean told him to wear a coat, but Ted replied, "I won't need a coat. Not tonight." Emma Jean phoned Billy's mom, who confirmed that Billy had not returned home either. More phone calls were made to other families, and suddenly a terrible realization dawned on all of them. All 5 men had vanished, but what appeared to be a tragic accident was about to become one of California's most confusing mysteries. Excited at the prospect of watching a California State University college basketball game, the 5 men met up beforehand and drove to the university. Fortunately, their team won, and they celebrated by the win by heading to a food store and picking up some goodies. The clerk, who attempted to you pronounce it, Chico. And now remember, on any crime shows that you watch, it's always important to remember the last person to actually see these people alive. I'm not saying the clerk had anything to do with the missing, men, but take note that he knew a lot. So, all 5 men had at some point been diagnosed with a disability or mental health disorder. Mathis was on antipsychotic medication after being diagnosed with schizophrenia disorder. He had 5 years earlier. He was diagnosed 5 years earlier. The 5 friends who had been due to play in their own basketball game with the Yuba City Vocational Rehab Center for the Handicapped, the team was known as the Gateway Gators. Okay, so not only were they friends, but they were part of a city team for handicapped young men. Sorry, I want to take a sip of water. This makes this even more sad knowing that they had a mental disorder and some of them had a handicap. The game fell through, but they each wore the badge, a beige Gateway Gators t-shirt, inspectors at the college basketball match. Due to the handicap, the men were well looked after, never left their families without telling them where they were or where they were going, and always returned home on time. The night after they failed to return home, the families of the 5 men called the police and an investigation was opened. As details of the case came to light, the families of the missing became more confused, and with every piece of new information came in. You know what? Could you imagine having, I don't know, anyone missing from your family, and you're just getting information coming from this way and that way, and the news, and you're dying for answers, but nobody has answers, and everything is just a mess. 4 days after the disappearance, on February 28th, police thought they had struck gold when they discovered Madruga's Mercury vehicle, but it wasn't quite where they expected it to be. The car was 70 miles away from Chico and the basketball game the men had attended. It was on a deserted mountain road, just feet from the edge of the snowdrift. The car wasn't stuck, and there had been no damage to it. Bizarrely, the gas tank was a quarter full, which meant the men could have easily turned around and driven back. So, what they're saying is that they found the car, but it was not in the direction they thought it would be. And on top of that, even if they got lost or got in trouble or something, they had enough gas in their car for them to turn around and go back the other direction. And they're saying the car wasn't stuck, there was no damages, nothing, it was just there. The inside of the car was littered with the junk food wrappers, except a marathon bar which had been left half-eaten. Inside the glove compartment were 4 maps of California, all folded very neatly. The keys and the men were nowhere to be seen. The road leading to the mountain with the treasurates, unsafe and in need of dire repair in the late 70s. Despite the unsafe nature of the road, the car had been driven in what would have been total darkness for many miles up the side of the mountain with no damage to the car at all. So what they're saying is that no matter what, because of the storm, they would have been driving in complete darkness. The roads were windy. It was unsafe. The actual road needed a lot of repairs. So how was it that this car made it this far, but with no scratches, no nothing, no dents, nothing? Police claimed it would have been impossible. Oh, I'm sorry. Police claimed it would have been possible if it had been in the daylight and the driver had extraordinary skills to navigate the potholes and bends. More surprisingly, the car showed no signs of mud stains or dents, which would have been impossible. Now see, that's just creepy. The families told police that as far as they knew, the men were not familiar with the road or mountain at all. This reminds me like watching a movie and you see people driving on this mountain in this little tiny narrow road, and one little, I don't know, hiccup, you're over like a cliff. I don't know if that's what it was, but I'm just saying. Okay, the family said that the roads, that they were not familiar with them at all, and that Madruga was the only one to ever drive the car, which he was adamant about. All the men had strict schedules they stuck to and had never gone off the beaten track. That right there knows that there's a serious problem. As the police began their search of the mountain, a storm came in and powdered the region with fresh snow. More experienced search teams were brought in, using snowmobiles to navigate the mountains, but the storm had made the land impossible to roam. After nearly losing a man in the drift themselves, the police called off the search 2 days later. They hadn't found a single trace of the men. The families were left to ponder what had happened to them and why they had taken the mountain road in the middle of the night. That's crazy because it's the way they're making it seem as if these boys had no business, like no business at all in that direction or on that road. It's unfortunate circumstance of wintry mountains that those who were missing in the snow are usually found after the thaw. On June 4th, a local motorcycle group were visiting the mountains and came across a deserted service camp just under 20 miles away from where Madruga's car was discovered. Wait a minute. Wow, so we went from February 24th to June, February, March, April, May, June. We went to almost 4 months later. Wow. Inside the main trailer, the frozen and partially decomposed body of Ted Weiner was discovered on a makeshift bed. Oh no, he had been covered with 8 sheets, which had been tucked under and around his head. His leather shoes were missing, and he was found with a gold necklace and wallet which still had cash in it. So it wasn't a robbery because the wallet and the necklace was still there. Beside him was a gold Waltham watch, which was unusual as the families of all 5 men claimed none of them had owned such a timepiece. Ted was usually shaven, but the growth of beard on his face suggested he had lived for an estimate of 2 months after the disappearance. How he managed to wander 20 miles miles through extreme snow drifts to the camp was anyone's guess. Strangely, the camp was home to emergency food, including dehydrated dinners, fruit cocktails, and beans. The outdoor storage shed had been opened and the food had been eaten and emptied. However, the storage cupboard in the trailer had never been opened and contained enough food to keep the men alive for at least 1 year. The trailer had a gas tank attached which could have kept the structure heated for many months, but it had never been turned on. What happened to the men that the food was never eaten and the electricity and heat were never used? Once police were informed of the body, it didn't take search parties long to find the others. 11 miles away from the car, they found the decomposed remains of Mendruga. See, I'm just hoping there's like a happy ending somewhere. Damn. He had been partially eaten by animals. He was found curled up, hugging his watch. That is so sad. The partially skeleton remains of Sterling were found nearby, scattered beside the road. 2 days later, after joining the search, Hewitt's father found a spine near the trailer. Searchers had discovered a skull and bones that were confirmed to belong to Hewitt through dental records. Research also found 3 discarded service blankets from the camp nearby. But Gary Mathis was missing and no remains were found. It was as if he had disappeared. So, basically, what I'm reading here is that that the last 2 bodies that they found, they actually had the camp blanket on them. So at one point they all left the car together, and at one point they all made it to this camp. Now why they separated, we don't know, because like the last 2 bodies, like I said, they were found with service blankets from the camp that the other body was found. Oh, this is even more creepy. So let's break this down. They were going the wrong direction. They were on a mountain they had no business being on, especially during a storm. There was not one scratch or dirt or nothing on the car. They all seemed to make it to the service camp, but for some reason they actually got split up, or I don't know. One stayed behind at the camp. One was found. I don't even, that's just sad. Oh man. And on top of that, there was nothing wrong with the car, and they had a full tank of gas. Why did they stop? And now we still have one missing, Gary. Gary's shoes were found inside the service trailer, so it was suspected he had removed Wire's leather shoes and worn them himself. When he did this and why he did this would remain unknown. Despite taking antipsychotic medication, he was known to be keeping his mental disorder under control and showed no recent signs of a breakdown. He had been working at his stepfather's business in a job he enjoyed, and he also collected army disability pay due to his disorder. He was well liked, well known to his friends and family, and simply loved basketball. So what happened to Gary? Special Agent John Thompson from the California Department of Justice simply said, bizarre. He claimed at the start of the investigation there had been over 1,000 1,000 leads, all of which were going nowhere or required a huge amount of manpower to follow up. To assist them, they hired a water diviner who claimed to have fixed his rods to look for human minerals. The diviner found an abandoned cabin in the woods near the abandoned car and discovered a lighter inside. No trace of Gary was there, nor were there any signs the 5 men had been in the cabin. The case was going cold at every single turn. None of the evidence were pointing to a fulfilled conclusion. The cold watch in the trailer may have been the result of a foster leaving it behind. Yeah, 'cause that camp, many people can be coming in and out of that camp for years. So technically they're right, that watch could have belonged to anyone. The lighter may have belonged to anyone as well. Despite shutting down the case on every lead, the mystery still remained. Where was Gary? Why drive up the mountain road in the first place? Why walk 20 miles into a treacherous territory and leave behind a perfectly working car? The theory and the stories were beginning to circulate. While they yet to be found, psychics came forward and claimed they knew where the men were. There used to be a show, I remember, there was a show I used to watch called The Medium, and I actually liked that show. She was a person that could see ghosts and stuff, and she used to work with the cops. Anyway, okay, so now we have psychics coming forward. One claimed they had seen one in Ontario, another in Tampa Bay, another in Sacramento. One even told police the men had been kidnapped and murdered in a 2-story house with red bricks. After the 4 men were discovered after the spring, the psychic theories were thrown out. Then came the Jones statement. 55-year-old Joseph Jones drove up the mountain road just before 6 p.m. while it was still daylight. He was checking the snow lines as he was planning to take the family to the mountain cabin for the weekend before the news of the storm came in. He got stuck in snow just meters from the location where the car would later be found. While attempting to dig the car out, Jones suffered a heart attack, which was later confirmed by doctors. He laid down in the back seat of the car with the engine on and the car heater turned up fully. In the middle of the night, he was awoken by headlights coming up the road and a strange whistling noise. He managed to crawl out of his car and look down the road where the vehicle had stopped. Through the haze of the headlights under the moonlit sky, he saw a group of men with a woman and a baby. He heard them talking and called out for help, but as soon as he yelled, the headlights went out and the talking stopped. Oh my god, this is getting so creepy, guys. Okay, a short while later, he saw flashlights near the car and again called out for help, but the flashlights went out with the sound of the voice. In the early hours of the morning, while it was still dark, his car ran out of gas and the heat shut off. He managed to walk 8 miles down the mountain road to a lodge where he called for help. He was coming down the mountain road. He walked past the car, which was empty in the middle of the road. It had been in the same location where he had heard the voices and seen the people talking. He recalled a strange whistling noise at the time he had seen the group of near the car, but couldn't describe what it was. There are many mysteries where the more most common theory is that the men took a wrong turn on the way home and drove up the mountain road by mistake, then looked for shelter and died in the process. However, Jones' statements seem to contradict that they had accidentally drove up there. And they're saying now, if a forester had traveled to the trailer camp a day before and would have left snow tracks for the camp. Okay, so what they're saying is that, okay, so maybe they were in trouble, right? So the night before there was no camps and trucks and everything out, so maybe they followed the tracks to the camp. But then they're saying their car was perfectly fine and their car worked. So why leave a perfectly running car with heat and gas to walk to a shelter? Upon finding the trailer, the men broke in and tried to survive. As time went on, each of them attempted to seek help and succumbed to hypothermia. Now see, that I can understand. I can see them like maybe getting lured to this camp for some reason. Maybe one was injured, the other one was like, you go this way, I go this way, and then maybe they got caught up. Except that doesn't explain why none of the food was eaten. Well, maybe as soon as, okay, so maybe one was injured. Maybe when they got to the camp, the ones that were not injured left right away, but then realized the storm was worse than they thought. Maybe why the gas wasn't turned on, or even why a fire hadn't been lit inside or outside the trailer. I don't know. Oh man, why, if there was food nearby, did Ted Weiner starve to death? The question continued to haunt true crime and mysterious. Yeah, like I hate cases like this because there are so many questions. And then it says, let's see, shortly after someone discovered. And then the one with the car, Madruga, his mother is claiming that there was a force that made them go up there and someone made them do it. And then the sister of one of them said, I can't understand why they didn't build a fire unless they were afraid of something in the woods. See, I agree with that. I think that was, okay, Majestic's conclusion, I think it was one of those, something went wrong. I do believe the guy was having a heart attack. I do believe he heard a whistling sound. Maybe the guys pulled over to help someone. They all got out, but when they realized something was wrong, they ran. I don't know. And then maybe they heard the old man scream for help, and the other couple or the other party went running. They didn't light a fire or anything like that, or light, because they didn't want to be found. Maybe one of them got injured, so one of them stayed behind, the one that was found in the actual trailer. Maybe he was injured and he couldn't go far, or maybe he panicked, I don't know. But maybe he was hidden in the trailer and the other friends branched off to maybe look for help. Investigators could never prove foul play, but also never ruled it out. And then it says, who was a woman that Jones had seen with the men that night on the mountain road. More importantly, where the fuck is Gary? Gary Mathis has never been found. No trace of him has ever been found, dead or alive. That is crazy. That's crazy. just weird saying certain words now. I guess my tongue too has to get used to like that hole, and then my gum area is still a little sore, so I do apologize. This next story is called The Devil's Teeth Murder. On a cliff top known as the Devil's Teeth, a 16-year-old girl was rumored to have been killed as a cult sacrifice. A rumor which gave the real killer a perfect cover to get away with murder. On a warm summer's day in Springfield Township, New Jersey, 16-year-old Jeanette Day Palmer said goodbye to her mother and jumped on a train to visit a friend. What seemed like an ordinary thing for a teenager to do became a mystery when Jeanette failed to return home that evening. When her mother found out her daughter had not arrived at her friend's house, she raised the alarm and contacted the police. An investigation began but went cold quickly when no leads came in. It was as if she just vanished into thin air. Until 6 weeks later, when a dog exploring, oh no, they found a decomposing forearm in its mouth. So a dog and a dog owner were minding their business, and a dog found a decomposing forearm in its mouth. Ah, man. Baby girl was 16. Damn. Investigators searched the area and discovered the partially skeleton and decomposing remains of Jeanette on top of the cliff overlooking the quarry. In their description of the event, those who found the body claimed it was surrounded by gold paraphernalia and wooden crosses. I also have learned that a lot of my true crime things that I watch on TV, a lot of times people would do things like that just to throw the whole investigation off. They would make it seem as if like maybe it's gang related and it's not, or they make it, make it look like it's a cult, but it's not. So yeah. Her body had been found inside a series of branches and logs laid out to look like the shape of a coffin. Inside the coffin shape were the homemade crosses made out of branches and wood nearby. As the discovery was made public, many locals would go on to claim the Jeanette remains were found inside the shape of a pentagram surrounded by mutilated animals. The location of the body was found on a cliff known as to the locals the Devil's Teeth. Police later denied the pentagram story but didn't deny the crosses and the coffin shapes. An autopsy didn't help as the cause of death was concluded to be indeterminate. But there was unusual high levels of lead found on the remains, so her remains were so badly decomposed that they couldn't even determine the cause of death. The local press at the time ran with the stories of witchcraft and cult sacrifice, with mentions of the murder being carried out by Satanists. When the story hit the New York Daily News, they went as far as saying Jeanette may have been killed by a local coven of witches. Not only did police struggle with the cause of death, but they were also getting overwhelmed with leads of witchcraft and cult murder. Putting witchcraft to the side, the autopsy showed she had known she was beaten up or, bruised or whatever, but what they could find, what was left, is that there was no signs of any broken bones, fractures. She hadn't been shot, not stabbed, no sign of drugs. So, due to this, it was automatically concluded that Jeanette had been strangled or suffocated to death. The investigation questioned Jeanette's family and friends to find out more about her, but a lot of the stories didn't match up, and building a picture of Jeanette's life was harder than they first expected. They were led to a homeless man named Red as a possible suspect, but they couldn't find him and ended up disregarding the lead. After exhausting all their leads and tips, investigators couldn't do anything more but let the case go cold until letters began arriving at a magazine office. The Weird New Jersey newsletter began in 1989 and said about documenting all the strange happenings in the around New Jersey area. It later evolved to become a magazine and popular website. From the early 1990s, they began receiving anonymous letters regarding the death of Jeanette Day Palmer. The editor and co-founder, Mark Morin, began researching the case and published articles on it before eventually publishing a book with Weird New Jersey correspondent Jesse Bulilak about the case in 2015. Their findings were as bizarre as they were impressive. While researching the case, they researched out of a Springfield police department who claimed they had no information on the D. Palmer death. They later stated that the file was lost due to flooding caused by Hurricane Floyd in 1999, though there had been allegations the department may have destroyed the case for reasons unknown. Now see, that's just during their research, the authors discovered multiple times that there may have been a cover-up in relation to the murder. They found connections to other unsolved murders and previously unknown suspects. The police began suggesting that Jeanette had died of a drug overdose, but it didn't account for the strange occult signs and wooden crosses that were found near the body. The coroner at the time also didn't find any traces of drugs on the remains. He had suggested strangulation or suffocation only because he couldn't rule it out. After decades of being given the runaround, Polyak made a breakthrough with the police file. A Freedom of Information request finally resulted in the original case file being found, along with crime scene photographs and newspapers reports. The finding debunked everything that had gone on before. The crime photos showed there were no makeshift wooden crosses, no coffin or pentagram shape around the body, and no signs of any cult activities. Yet a local newspaper in 1972 claimed that after reviewing the crime scene photos, they found wooden cult symbols, crosses, and the coffin shape around the body. But my thing is this though, like, if that wasn't true, I can't figure out why police be like, that information is not true. Like, why would they let that story run if that wasn't even in the original police file? Then it says for years, the Springfield Police Department claimed that the spot where she was found was known for a hangout for teenagers, drinkers, accusers. Except the location where the body was found was overgrown and hidden, certainly not a place for teenagers to hang out and party. The report also showed that the belongings of Jeanette's purse had been emptied a few meters from the body, but the purse was nowhere to be seen. This meant that there was it was possible that she was murdered and then robbed. Why did the police claim the file was lost? Unfortunately, it's not unusual for case files to be lost, destroyed, or misplaced over the years. But then just say that. But then again, they did say that. The very nature of data recording in the 20th century was sketchy to say the least. What is mysterious is the constant belief that it had been destroyed despite the file subsequently being found. Yeah, but not only that, I need to know why no one shut down those witchcraft rumors. Oh, why the focus on witchcraft? Yeah, why claim there was a cult symbol around the body when there was not? The answer might be more obvious than we first thought. Just 8 months earlier, an undefined man, later known as John List, killed his entire family in the small suburb of Westfield in New Jersey. He was arrested 17 years after the fact. The murders had been so intricately planned that the bodies were found 1 month after the murders. Suddenly, the attention of the national media was focused on Westfield to such a degree that press fans were seen all over the place for weeks. Westfield is only 4 miles from Springfield Township, where Jeanette's body was found. For the police in the region, who just had the county's press on their doorstep, they maybe decided to hide the fact of Jeanette's case so he didn't blow up like the List case did. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that police covered it up, but whoever did this clearly either planted it there, but it still doesn't understand why the police lied about it. And then they're saying, well, maybe the police lied about it because maybe they wanted to keep the connection between List and Jeanette's murder and wanted to keep it to themselves just in case, I guess, someone was caught or something. But then I don't know. Despite the theory, what is certain is that Jeanette De Palmer was murdered on that cliff overlooking the quarry, and because local press ran with stories of cult and sacrifice, they may have given the real killer the perfect cover story to get away with murder. Jeanette's killer and the motive behind her murder have never been solved. See, that's some bullshit. Damn it. And this might be the last story. I don't know, but I gotta tell you, this title caught my attention. And it's titled The Cross-Dressing Cannibal. What? The cross-dressing cannibal. It doesn't get much bizarre than the cross-dressing cannibal who claimed his female personality was responsible for him killing and eating his victims. Oh yes, we're going in. There is perhaps nothing scarier than the killer who eats their victims. Oh yeah. Because technically, they're getting away with murder, and they're also getting away with the evidence, if that kind of makes sense. That is creepy. We are drawn to these grim cases of evil wrongdoings with a macro fascination for how they played out and the reason behind it. True crime has a way of drawing us in and gripping personally think if someone asks me that, I think, well, one, because I am a survivor of one that could have actually been, I could have been a true crime story in a newspaper clipping somewhere. So, but even before that, I wanted to go into criminology. I don't know, I think I'm just fascinated on the fact that how people can do this to one another, or for me, I think it's the backstory for me. Like, how does someone get this hateful, or how does someone get this mean, or how can someone, like, torture their 13 kids? And if you didn't want kids, why did you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 more of them? I think it's the why for me, not necessarily the actual case. I mean, these cases are interesting, but majority of the cases that I read, like for instance, like Jack the Ripper, why Hitler, why, like, these people did nothing to you, so that's my answer. But people are drawn to evil, people are drawn to wrongdoings, and I think it's because we're just shocked on this is actually happening type of thing, you know what I mean? By the way, you might hear the trucks outside. We are in for a storm, and they are prepping outside, so just giving you heads up. Okay. It's bad enough when one person is convicted of cannibalism, but coming from a family of cannibals is something on a whole other level. For Hayden, I like the name, Hayden Irvin Clark, aka the cross-dressing cannibal. He was simply following in the footsteps of his brother, who killed and ate his girlfriend. Oh. Hayden was suspected of being a serial killer, but it had never been confirmed. He is known to have killed 2 people, 1 child, 1 adult. But it had been suggested he had killed more, and when he confessed to killing dozens since 1974. But it was suggested he killed more. Oh, but it was suggested he killed more when he confessed to killing. Okay, so he confessed. Alright, born in Troy, New York in 1952, his childhood was far from peaceful, at least behind closed doors. His parents promoted the image of a perfect family life. His father was a chemist, whose job was high earning enough to keep them in good steady. Behind closed doors, though, it was a whole different story. His parents were closet alcoholics and were violent towards each other and their children. When his mother was drunk, she referred to Hayden as Kristen and made him wear girls' clothes due to her anger that she was birthed a boy instead of a girl. Wow. This had a long-lasting effect on Hayden, and would dress in women's clothes for most of his private life, even going as far as believing there was a female entity within him that he could not control. Isn't that considered like a split personality disorder, I think, or something? He would claim that his female alter ego was responsible for his crimes and commitments. After his father committed suicide when he was a teenager, Hayden's downward spiral to death and madness began. His mother moved the family to Maryland, where Hayden turned to torturing and killing small animals. He also bullied other children and was generally antisocial. Yeah, that's a problem. Forget anything else. Like, there's a couple of things I hope you guys will never forget. I tell you, if you think of nothing else, if you see someone's child killing killing animals. Like, it's time to call 911. It's time to call the priest. It's time to call the psych ward. Like, do not take that lightly, ladies and gentlemen. It is not normal for little kids to want to hurt animals. Absolutely not. Torturing them, killing them, anything like that. He had two brothers and one sister, one of whom was Bradville Clark, who was convicted of killing and eating a woman who had spurned his sexual advances in 1984. Oh, okay, so she was like, I don't want you. He was like, alright, killed her, ate her. This is crazy. So this is what happened that night. The brother was invited to Patricia's and husband's barbecue, but Tricia's husband couldn't make it, so she went alone. After a night of heavy drinking, Trish refused to be his girlfriend, and Bradfield responded by slapping her head against the wall, strangling her, and cutting her up into little pieces. He sliced off her breast and cooked them on a barbecue grill. He confessed to his crime and was convicted of the murder. If that wasn't bad enough, what Hayden did was even worse. First off, there was a show on, I don't know what channel it was on, but it was either called Hannibal or Cannibal. And I'll never forget the moment that we saw his cookbook for how to cook people, like certain wines and glaze and like sides and stuff like that. Like, how do you learn how to cook humans? Like, you don't wake up with that talent. You just don't, and I'm pretty sure you just don't put like salt and pepper on it. Or do you? My God. Hayden's only sister ran away from home as a teenager and later proclaimed that she didn't have a family. Like, seriously though, like, who you, like, that probably saved her life. Hayden already had a reputation for being evil by the time his brother was incarcerated. If anyone crossed him or dared to belittle him, then he would kill their pets, sometimes leaving the Alright, so besides killing their pets, he would chop off their heads and leave the heads at their doorstep. Like, that's a whole different level. He trained as a chef and served in the United States Navy until he was discharged after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. You think. But that answers my whole cooking chef thing. Like, how do you cook humans? He was a chef. So, there goes my joke. A doctor's report later stated that Hayden believed that birds and squirrels spoke to him, signs of extreme delusion and psychosis. But it was left untreated. You know, that's a problem. A lot of people in this world, a lot of Americans are left untreated or not diagnosed properly with their mental issues or mental disorders. After being discharged from the Navy, Hayden's condition deteriorated and he moved from job to job without a focus, taking cash in hand out wherever he could. He drifted across the state of Maryland, virtually homeless and wallowing in. Oh, okay, so his delusions were getting worse. Now, see, one thing about being homeless, like any type of mental illness, will start to really come to light. Because remember, there's no one to look after you. There's no doctors. You're not taking any type of medications whatsoever. And if you're homeless, you're probably not eating, eating right, cold, probably infections, like a whole lot of stuff is going on. and scattering rotten fish heads throughout the property. Yeah, what's up with these animals killing though? He also dressed as a woman to steal purses from churches and residential homes. He pled guilty on all occasions but was never given jail time. He later claimed to police that he had been killing since 1974 when he was just 22 years old. But the first confirmed and soon to be convicted murder occurred on May 31st, 1986. He killed a 6-year-old girl named Michelle Dorr, who was a friend of his niece, once Lizzie Clark. Michelle had grown bored of playing alone and wandered down the street looking for Lizzie, but she wasn't in. Clark then lured her into an upstairs room in his brother's house, the only brother to not be in prison. He followed her upstairs, telling her that Lizzie was in the bedroom. When she stepped into the room, he pushed Michelle to the floor and slashed her with the knife on her. He slashed her with the knife on the... I can't even finish this. On her back before stabbing her in the throat. What the fuck? He attempted to have sex with her corpse, but instead resorted to eating parts of her body and drinking her blood. He then squashed the corpse into a bag, cleaned up most of the blood, and buried the girl in a nearby remote park. Wow. 6 years after his first confirmed kill, Hayden claimed his second confirmed kill was when he murdered 23-year-old Harvard graduate Laura Ho. She lived in Maryland, and this took place on October 18th, 1992. Since the murder of Michelle, Hayden had taken to dressing as a woman and would do so in public, never really sure of his sexuality, which would be worked by an abusive mother. Hayden had taken a small job as a gardener for Laura's mother, Penny, when she accused him of stealing tools from the shed. Angry at the accusation, Hayden took his revenge. He entered the family home in woman's clothes, then stabbed Laura to death while she was in her bedroom. He suffocated her with a pillow to ensure that she was dead, wrapped her in a blanket, then dragged the body to another remote wooden area and buried her. He later returned to the house, dressed in a wig and a woman's clothes, and walked out the front door, pretending to be his victim. This is like some Norman Bates shit. He did that so people would think that Laura was still alive. He was caught when a fingerprint on one of Laura's pillows came back as a match for him, due to the records from his previous arrest, when he was taken into custody, where he confessed. A police